Hello, welcome to the EP7 podcast. You are here with Rachel Donovan and the founder of EP7, Mr. George Helou.
Thanks, Rachel, and thank you for joining us. We love talking about how to get the heart into everything we do to get a lot out of life.
Whether it be relationships, business, careers, you name it. So, let's get started. So the juicy topic we have for this podcast is one that we came up with really quickly after talking last week, and it's about over-responsibility and how we can take a responsibility in other people's happiness.
Yeah.
And sort of intervene and feel obliged, or that we have to, or that it is our responsibility to make them happy, make sure everything's okay, do the right thing.
Yeah. Rachel, haven't you experienced in I'd say your whole life, I know I can relate to this, that the message was always be responsible. It's important to be responsible. And no one ever said you can be too responsible. Like that, in my experience, I've never had someone say to me, you're being over responsible here. You're being too responsible.
No, that's not something I've heard of people saying.
Yeah. And every time we talk about any topic, it always seems to link to balance. Like you can go extreme either way and it causes problems.
But I think more often than not, then, you look at people who aren't responsible enough and that becomes a focus rather than when it swings the other way and you are over-responsible.
Yeah, do you think it's because those that are being over-responsible are almost seen as heroes because they save everyone? They're doing everything for everyone. So they end up feeling good about themselves even though it's draining?
Yes. And do you think there's sometimes maybe a bit of a judgment as well because doing everything and they're taking the responsibility and they're sort of noble that everyone else kind of pales in, like isn't good enough or isn't doing their bit, so there's judgment from people who are over-responsible on others?
Oh, yeah. It's like only they are the ones that know how things should be done. So they should be relied upon more and everybody else is being too inadequate, not up to scratch. And therefore, just give me the job. I'll do it kind of thing. It actually sounds familiar, doesn't it? Like, I don't mean to pick on you or me. I'm just saying it sounds familiar in life to hear people saying, look, I better take that over. I'll do that.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So I picked on you by accident and I hit the spot.
The older sister, sometimes I feel like there's a bit of that with being the eldest sibling that you kind of are expected to be sometimes the responsible one.
Yeah. You know what's crazy about that is that you're the older sister by how many years, Rach?
2.
Yeah. And so when you're like 6 and, the next one's 4, you're the older sister. But when you're 20 and she's 18, you're still the older sister. So it doesn't matter how old you are. When you're 72 and she's 70, you're still the older sister that should be doing more.
Yeah.
It reminds me with my brother, he always made the excuse that I was the older brother that knew how to mow the lawn. Problem was I started when I was like 10 years old. And he was still saying the same thing when he was 16 and I was 18 about mowing the lawn.
Really?
Well, I'm exaggerating. Obviously, if he heard this right now, he'd be offended that I've probably exaggerated. But he definitely played the card that he was younger, even though that I had started younger than him at doing whatever it was. He was definitely under-responsible in our youth, and I was the over-responsible one because I was the eldest son.
Yeah, right.
So I wonder if that happens with parents, that they get in the habit of looking to the older one, but not really measuring the fact that the younger one is twice as old as the older one with that task that they made, that they linked that the only person that could do it was the older one. I don't even know if I just made sense then. Did that come out? It sounded like a riddle.
No, I understood what you said. It did make sense.
Oh, good. Well, hopefully it's not just the two of us.
So, I mean, how do we know, though, if we've become over-responsible?
Well, you're too busy. You're the go-to for things to get done. You're exhausted. And you're very annoyed at people because they don't do things right. So in other words, you're over-responsible, but no one can do it as good as you, like we were saying earlier. So yeah, if you're too perfectionistic, there's a good chance you're taking things off people because it annoys you too much that they're not doing it to your standard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing.
Yeah.
Also, being a rescuer. If you can't stand watching people be uncomfortable with a task or a responsibility, and you feel like you need to put them out of their misery and take over so that they're not struggling, yeah, you're being over-responsible because you're depriving them of learning and growing.
Because before we started recording, you said a comment about it, which is that being over-responsible is disrespectful.
Yeah, and that's it. You've just chimed in then on the fact that it's disrespectful because you're denying other people the right to grow and develop because you think that you're doing them a favor by giving them a fish, but you will never let them learn how to fish for themselves and catch endless fish.
Yeah.
And why do we do that, Rachel? Because our identity, for us to feel valuable, we find ways for people to need us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of us feeling safe that, oh, look, I'm not going to be kicked out on my own, abandoned. I'm too valuable for people. They need me. And so the brain's always on the lookout to maintain being needed. And you know what's funny about that, Rachel?
What's that?
There's a conveyor belt of people willing to be needy. They come off the production line. So for the people who need to be needed, there's plenty of people that don't want to take responsibility and are happy to delegate and defer. So it ends up creating very problematic relationships where there's resentment, but no one really knows that they're actually contributing to the problem, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, can they do anything right? It's like, and they're useless. I need to do everything for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, like really?
Hand in hand.
Yeah. So over-responsibility.
Yeah. So what about when someone is feeling over-responsible and so they're feeling like they've got to do so much and they've got to make sure that person's happy and they've got to take care of this over there and then do something over there for that person and they're wanting to do it because that's sort of – but then they're not getting to do everything, so then they feel like failing and they feel guilty because they're not getting the sense of achievement of being over-responsible because they're just not managing to do everything to do.
Yeah, so it's like it's unsustainable, is it? Like the more it intensifies, the more the unprincipled position of being over-responsible gets exposed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because suddenly you're trying to be responsible for too much and you're not equipped to handle it all, so you become responsible for none of it, which I would imagine is a horrendous state to be in because you're so emotionally invested in being needed, yet you're so hooked into letting people down, you know, like that can't be fun. Do you know people like that, Rach?
I think I relate to it a little bit.
Do you?
Yeah. I hate letting people down. And I try not to overcommit myself because when I know I've got a lot on and I don't think I can handle it, but yet I'm responsible to always then say yes. This probably comes into the people-pleasing thing, saying yes to people because I don't want to let them down, or I want to be there, or they've asked me to come to something and I'm really got a lot on, but I'm like, well, they want me to be there, I better go. And so it's just kind of that sort of thing.
Yeah. Look, sometimes I catch myself being too responsible for the emotional state of certain people. But I think I've improved a lot over the years because, look, put it this way. If someone cried 20 years ago because they had financial problems, I was writing them a check to save them. Tears were like putting your password into an ATM machine. You got my money. And I kid you not, Rach, I lost a lot of money to even one individual that I found out that she was a gambler, compulsive gambler, ruining her family's life because she would put her month's salary into the poker machines in 4 hours. Yeah. And I didn't know that. And I thought that it was just a one-off situation that she was in that she needed to get over. And I thought I was saving the family and them just, and they got me deep for a lot of money, like over 20 grand. And I was like that a lot with people, like giving them money because it's like I'm responsible for your financial well-being. You're not allowed to need to learn to live within your means. I just can't stand to see you in pain. Because what is pain? Pain tells you that what you're doing and the choices you're making are not attracting what you want. So if it's physical pain, you're neglecting the well-being of your body and you're being reckless and you're whatever. It could be bad technique in sport. It could be you're not paying attention, whatever. Emotional pain tells you your relationships are not right. And some things you're choosing to take things personal or whatever it is, right? So there's something to learn in that too, right? And mental pain, which is all related anyway, is telling you that the ideas you have about yourself and life are not healthy and they're making you think that you have to make choices that are loaded with assumptions that are not true, and therefore you're going down the wrong tangent in life. You're making wrong decisions and you're stuffing yourself up. So pain reveals something's not right because your natural state is to be healthy, emotionally well, and connecting to a world that's abundant. Anything that deviates you from that means there's something to learn. But if we're being over-responsible for those around us, we're depriving them of learning based on life talking to them, saying, hey, how you're thinking, how you're feeling and what you're doing is not working. How about you be different? And then I come along, oh, that's all right. You don't need to be different. I'll be the buffer. I'll throw lots of money in so you don't have to feel your poor money habits. Oh, that's all right. I'll fix this so that you can not learn the lesson and just repeat it later so that me or someone else has to run in and save you again for the same issue. And that's the thing, once you realize that if you're taking responsibility for everybody else's well-being, it's one thing to help someone off the floor because of an accident or a mistake where they need to learn. It's another thing to keep dragging them off the floor. Like, for example, if someone is eating too much and they become so big that they can't get out of bed, how do they get to the food, Rachel? They have an enabler, someone else that feels responsible to keep them happy. And happiness is them eating more even though they can't even get out of bed. How crazy is that? So these guys end up weighing 200-300 kilos, or 400-500 pounds. And it's scary. And you think to yourself, how does someone get to that? They need help. Someone's been over-responsible. And also governments get my goat. Like, they always need to be over-responsible for us. Like, we got no brains. Like, there's a little crack on the pavement and then suddenly, one can sue someone. It's like, really? Like, at what point do we take one step after the other and we got to kind of like decide that where we're going is our responsibility? And every time something goes wrong, Rachel, in society, the government needs to fix this. That's all I hear, It's like nothing happened for 10 years. This happens once, and now we're going to make new laws so that in case it happens one more time in the next 10 years, we all have to spend 5 minutes each a day doing something differently in case that one thing in 10 years happens and it hurts someone. So I think the government is way over responsible. And to be honest, they have a vested interest to be, because they get more powerful the more they're needed. Actually, I find that interesting. It's almost like this relationship of equality where we give to one another what we each other want. And then there's that really nice, sustainable relationship. I think we're not very good at that, Rachel. I think we slip where someone has to give more and the other one becomes codependent.
Mm-hmm.
And then over responsibility happens.
Yeah.
So would you say that the root of all this is our own personal confidence in our abilities and capabilities?
Oh, I don't know.
Because why would someone hold back and be needy and let someone else do all the work for them? Is it because they don't back themselves?
Yeah. What is it? Laziness or the lack of confidence?
Do you know, this is a good point. I'll say that, but you can be the judge of it, right? I'm pretty autonomous. So if you put me into a role, I just make it my own and I just get on with it, right? Are you like that, Rachel? You like that freedom of just making a position your own, right? Anyway, I remember once I was in a role, and every time I went to do something that I was very clear about, and I'm a problem solver. So it doesn't even matter if there's an aspect of it I haven't worked out. I'm going to work it out. I've got Google. I can research, whatever. And then suddenly I found that the person that I was reporting to as a client that I had this major contract with, they would immediately pick on what I'm doing before I've even finished developing the approach and decide that they had to control exactly how I did everything.
Right.
And they kept doing it over and over and over. And then something happened to me and I was shocked by it. I actually started second guessing myself. I started to hold back, and I was worried that whichever way I go is not going to be the way that's going to be accepted. I literally became paralyzed out of my motivation and my autonomy, because that person felt he had to be over responsible and make sure that everything I did could never go wrong, no matter what I did.
Wow.
So I'm thinking to myself, I'm so headstrong. I'm so clear about backing myself to problem solve. And if that happened to me, what chance do most of us have that are trying to develop our confidence in something and someone's been like that around us? If we become a product of the environment. So if you have a boss or a manager or a major client and they are controlling everything and how it goes, eventually that repetition of being treated that way, it's going to tell your brain, you don't know how to do it. You need to always look for someone else. And eventually the brain gets into the habit of playing it safe and avoiding judgment, and therefore looking for someone else to tell you what to do every step of the way. Now, Isn't that insulting? So in other words, aren't we insulting each other when we're depriving our potential, our ability to really show how capable we are by deciding, no, you will do it only the way that I decide, and that's it? When really the truth is there are many ways you can come at something, some not as efficient, right? But the thing is, Rachel, I've noticed that perfectionism, when people are trying to find the ultimate way and then they're what-ifing, they end up burning so much of their worry and their procrastination and their overthinking that by the time it actually gets done, they've ruined relationships, they've spent too much time and resources on the what ifs, that yes, there would have been another way to do it that wouldn't have been as efficient, but their way ruined any efficiencies that was eventually worked out anyway. So sometimes it's good to be balanced with, okay, I'm going to consolidate as much of what I know and what's around me with my approach, but I'm going to back myself that as I'm tested, I will learn what's missing from reality, which talks a lot. Experience tells you everything, right? No matter how much you've run the philosophy and the theory in your head, the experience will tell you everything. And the moment it tells you that, you quickly know, look what I'm missing. And then you're able to do something with that, right? And evolve your approach or whatever. So, yeah, I think that philosophy is good for people that are over-responsible, because then they can start to allow other people to let experience talk to them. Does that paint a picture?
It does. And continuing on from that point, it's sort of, so what do you do if you feel you are over-responsible? How do you pull back a little bit? Or
it's not easy, because we're talking about a subconscious wire to freak out at the idea of letting go. So while it's very important to do it for your own well-being and the quality of your relationships with other people, expect a fight from your own psyche, your own subconscious and your own body. It's going to fight it, right? But maybe, knowing that that's going to be the case, maybe we look at the low-lying fruit first. In other words, which things do you do for people that they'd rather you didn't do, but you can't help yourself? That's probably the easiest place to start, because they don't even want it, but you think, they want it, so you're going to earn brownie points or something. I'd say back off there, and then as you feel anxious and restless because you're starting to feel less valuable and therefore more insecure, take deep breaths and say to yourself, if the world is going to turn on me for not being everything to it, and I'm not allowed to be balanced and at peace to have me time too, without being always super busy, then it can do whatever it wants. I'm not interested in that world. If it's going to criticize me, then I'm going to stand up for something more important than my fear of being judged. And I'm going to stand for something that makes sense to me. Have I sold it, that way of being? I'm trying to sell it.
I think you're selling it very, very well.
Oh, good. You're buying it? I'm buying it. Yeah. I think we should say to ourselves, come on, what are we going to stand for here? Look at the people around you and start to pay attention to their habits of being codependent on you and those around them. Look at how the cause and effect of that deprives them of their beautiful journey of discovering how great they are. Like, I've probably mentioned this to you before, but when I was in radio, a manager wouldn't give me the solution when ads went wrong on air. And I didn't like that manager for several weeks because I thought he was very lazy. And come on, he should be responsible because he's in a power position to make the decisions on how we should go. But he would say to me, what do you want to do about it? And I went, what's wrong with this guy? He's asking me. He's the manager. After several weeks of having to do all the work for him, that was my attitude at the time, right? I realized, Rachel, that he did me the biggest favor because I was solving complex problems very quickly, and it built my confidence and it made me feel really good about myself. Yeah. And it took him willing to be unpopular with me for several weeks for me now to always talk about him fondly. Wow. And actually, and I'm going to mention his name because he deserves to be known for what he did for me. His name is Chris Edis. He was a manager at Australia at Today FM. at the time. And we actually had lunch a couple of years ago when he was here in Perth, and I told him this story for the first time, how I mentioned him and how that had an impact on me. But see, if he was a manager, because I know a lot of managers when I'm consulting to business, right? I know a lot of managers where they're too busy because they're not delegating and they're not empowering their work culture. So a lot of things bottleneck at them. So when I see them and we unpack this, we discover that they're being over-responsible. Well, he didn't have that problem. He really believed that, no, you let the team live up to their potential and think for themselves, because otherwise you're not going to be a good manager because you're going to have your head down, bum up too much, and you're not going to see the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in a business context, over-responsibility is a big problem as much as under-responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, you have people shirking responsibility and not taking ownership of the client experience and all that. So that's a disaster for a business. But having managers take on too much then stresses them out, and then they become narky. And also what they do is they don't let those under them develop, which to them, it's their way of feeling secure, that they hold on to the knowledge, they hold on to the technical know-how, and it's their way of feeling like they're secure in their job. But it really hurts the business badly because of that, because the new people aren't developing to eventually grow. And then really the real reality is those managers, Rachel, would go to the next level if they empowered those above them to be as good as them.
Yeah.
And every entrepreneur that really got big, including Richard Branson, when I was on a boat with Richard Branson for a charity thing, I'm name dropping now, right? That was one of the things he said, like he let the people take ownership, and he even, because he knew that was a weakness in him, he moved into his own home office when he appointed a general manager, a virgin, so that he wouldn't be tempted to interfere with him.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
He mitigated his own weakness that he would probably want to, don't do it that way. And that was a wonderful thing he did, because that person was able to really consolidate and prove himself and develop more quickly.
Yeah, right.
And in a family environment, our precious children, like being over-responsible for them. So what happens is when they're babies, you have to be over-responsible. The poor things don't know where the food is, and if they crap their pants, that's going to stay there unless you do something about it. But these children grow, and we don't keep up with their capability, and we don't know how to strike that balance of stretching them. So in other words, like, for example, I wrote this blog article a little while ago when my daughter wanted the fidget spinner, and we bought it and she didn't like the color, so she's upset. And so I said, yeah, that's fine, Holly. We'll go back and you can ask them for another one. She goes, no, Daddy, you do it. Now, we ended up sitting down and I ended up having a half an hour coaching session with my daughter, because apparently, Rachel, I was the worst parent ever because I would not rescue her and just go, yeah, no problem, I'll go get you another one. Because I saw it like a $15 fidget spinner. That was not the valuable experience here, because she would play with it for a bit and forget about it. The valuable experience for my beautiful daughter is for her to witness that she's a lot more capable than she was allowing herself to feel. So I said, and then all the objections she's thrown at me why I should do it and she shouldn't, I was very impressed with her. She's a negotiator. But the bottom line was, I was clear about my principles, that she's capable, and she was trying to sell me that she wasn't. And she wasn't going to win that argument, right? So eventually I said to her, okay, imagine we're driving home and you've got two timelines you can choose. The one where you chose to be courageous and go get the color that you want and you're proud of yourself in the car, or the one where you chose not to. And now this fidget spinner you got that you don't like the color, it's a reminder that you chose to keep that and now you're upset. You have those two futures waiting for you. You get to decide which one you want. Because 30 seconds of talking to someone is going to give you the future that you want, or if you're going to fear it, you're going to have the future you don't want. It's up to you. So are you ready to go home or you? And then eventually she goes, okay, then let's do it. So do what? And she agreed. And she went and she was quiet for a bit. And the lady was so lovely. She cottoned on to what was going on. And then eventually Holly spoke up and then it flowed in the most beautiful way. And Holly got to experience that if she's unhappy and she expresses that she'd like to have a different experience, that humanity is kind and it will want to accommodate.
That's so lovely.
But if I was over-responsible, I would have deprived her of that experience. To connect with an adult with a concern and not be anxious and think that she's going to be judged or, you know?
Do you know what? It's funny because I have this story that I have with my little sister and we laugh about it today. So I would have been, I guess, 12 years old. So she would have been 6 years old, something like that. And we were shopping and she wanted to order some chips and we got in the queue and she's like, you order it, Rachel, you order it. And I was like, no, we go to the front and you're going to order it. So we get to the front and she looks at me and I just don't do anything. And so she orders it in the most cute little coy way. She did it and I'm like, girl, I have this story today, like now, because when we go out to restaurants, I'm like, Kira, you do the ordering. And she does all the ordering for the table because
wow.
I know I always go, I take responsibility for it. I'm not even supposed to do that. But I always just, because I was trying to encourage her to be, have more confidence when she was little and speak up.
So, Rachel, why are you being so lazy and under-responsible now?
Never picking the benefits. No.
For the rest of your lives, you're going to be 70 at a restaurant. She's like, what, 64 at the time or something? Yep. Yeah. She's, and you look at your young 64-year-old sister, you make her do the ordering. Yeah. Good on you.
Well, on that note, I think that was some really great, wonderful insights in there into responsibility and how, the pros and cons of, and how we should stay balanced and be aware.
Yeah, that's the message, isn't it? Like the balance of being responsible enough but allowing others to connect with you and having a healthy relationship in that way.
All right. Cool. Well, until next time, thanks for joining us on an EP7 podcast. Chat to you soon.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us on another EP7 podcast. If you liked what you heard, remember to share and subscribe so you're notified of every podcast released. If you have any questions or would like to connect with us, please jump on the EP7 official Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you.